It's my honor and privilege today to welcome a special guest on the BW Dialogue. He really doesn't need an introduction. He's lived many lives in one life. But let me formally welcome Ms. Indra Nooyi, who is really a business executive, a business leader who's known across the world. He's been the former chairperson and CEO of the PepsiCo, and he is somebody who really epitomizes Indians and Indian success abroad and the values that she stands for. Really went to the University of Madras. He went to the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta. He went to Yale University and joined Pepsi in a very senior position. And then in 2006, she became the CEO of PepsiCo. She's done many things. She's on boards of very large, valuable companies. She's very passionate about women leadership and inducting more and more women into the workforce and making sure that the world is a better place because women are involved and women lead. Today, we are going to talk to her about her maiden book. It's coming out very soon, and hopefully you will have a copy of it. So let me welcome Ms. Indra Nooyi, and we'll be talking to her about her book, My Life in Full. So welcome, Ms. Nooyi. And first of all, how have been the last 17 months for you, both personally and professionally?
First of all, thank you for having me on this show, Anurag, because I think Business World is a very, very reputable magazine publication. And what you've done to build out the ecosystem of magazines around the core business magazine is commendable. So it's a privilege to be on the show and to be interviewed by you. Let me speak about the last 17, 18 months. I think it's been a bittersweet in a way. The sweet because, this book was an unbelievable product of the last 17 or 18 months. We had time to think about the messages, think about my life, think about what we should include and not. We took a walk down memory lane. It evoked a lot of smiles, a lot of sadness. So it was a fantastic experience. But the last 17, 18 months also saw us go through the world's worst, most debilitating pandemic. COVID shut down the world in ways that I never thought I'd see. And in a way, the book and the pandemic came together because the pandemic laid bare the problems faced by a lot of young family builders, by women, in terms of all the priorities they have to balance. It brought the book more to life and gave it more legs, if you want to call it that. But it's been a hectic 17 or 18 months.
Thank you so much. You used the expression bittersweet, and I understand when you remember the past, you become nostalgic. It brings some memories of family to the fore. You miss India, and you can never take India out of an Indian, even if it's somebody as successful as you and been in the US for more than 4 decades. But India is where your heart is, or somebody who reads your book will understand that. Before we delve more into the book, let me tell our viewers that the publisher of Hatchet, Palumi Chatterjee, wrote to me saying it is the biggest book of 2021. And she sends me a lot of books. She doesn't write that on every book, or she hasn't written that on any other book. So let me ask you, Ms. Nooyi, what are your personal expectations from this book?
This was a book that I thought about a lot and debated whether to write a book or to just publish articles. But then I was convinced that this book would have legs and more relevance and would spur more of a conversation if I informed my lessons with my life. Because people were curious to find out how I got to where I did and how I stayed there and how I managed to keep a marriage going and kids. So I had to include my life with the lessons I wanted to talk about. And I think my hope is that this book will spur a big conversation on this issue of how do we provide the support systems to allow young family builders to have a family, produce kids that are productive and can contribute to the economy. At the same time, they themselves can be in paid jobs and be able to contribute to the family. So this is not, as I've said many times, it's not my book, it's our book. And when I say this to women in particular, they're emotional about it because they all are going through the stress. And families which are supposed to be a source of strength end up being a source of stress because there's so many competing priorities and the burden falls disproportionately on women. And the workplace is no longer a complete stress reliever because you face unconscious bias there. There's lots of issues where there's no pay parity for women. So I think women look at this and go, I'm so glad you're taking this on as an issue, because we need the big voices in corporate America to convene, to talk about these issues and move thought to action. So I think that's why this book is now resonating with people, resonating with business people, resonating with women, and giving people hope, saying that this might as well help accelerate progress on all of these issues.
Thanks so much, Ms. Nooyi. You already kind of got into the book, but let me delve deeper into the book and what's in the book. Essentially, as you just said, you documented both the personal and professional experiences, which have larger implications for the country, for the world, the economy, for businesses, for entrepreneurs. And you've given special attention to two things. One is family. Throughout the book, family comes out very strongly, and not necessarily in every business leader's book. I mean, family has a special space, but there's a continuing theme. And second is of women in the women workforce. And essentially, once I have read the book, you're saying, if I could do it, so could you. So tell me, why have you chosen that narrative? And again and again in the book, through your personal experiences, you bring out your own journey and you give hope to women. But give us a sense of when you were writing this book, why did this theme of women workforce, increasing women's participation at the leadership, which still is very low, especially in India. US does a little better than India. Give us a sense of what were you thinking?
So, when I stepped down as CEO of PepsiCo, when I retired after 12 years, there was a lot of talk about, why didn't a woman replace you? Because our board went through a very deliberate process and they looked at the candidates, they were all men, and they picked a man. And the fact that people asked me, why didn't a woman replace you, sort of hurt, because I kept asking myself, what could I have done to develop women in the pipeline to be CEOs? It's interesting, they never ask a man, why didn't a woman replace you? But they ask a woman, why didn't a woman replace you? That's a subject for a different discussion for a different time. But as I looked deep into this issue, I realized that it's not that I only gave them men, it's just that the women that I developed, many left the company because they were given CEO jobs in smaller companies, earlier in life. And they didn't want to wait around for PepsiCo, or there weren't enough coming up the pipeline because early in the pipeline, they were just leaving the company because they couldn't deal with the pressure of the job and having a family. So the biological clock and the career clock were in conflict. And so I'm sitting here going, let me look at the numbers. Girls are 70% of the high school valedictorians in the United States. I'm sure if you look at a similar statistic for India, girls are doing very well in schools. Girls are doing very well in colleges when they're given a chance to go to college. They're getting all the top grades. Even in STEM, they're more than 50% of the class. They enter the workforce and then they disappear from the workforce after the first 2 or 3 years. I think it's a loss for the country. Because basically what we're saying, both for the US and for India, we're saying that if we cannot deploy the best and the brightest of the country in the service of the country, to grow the economy, to contribute to the GDP of the country, we are actually not doing ourselves a service. So the big question is, you don't want to choose from only half the population, which may not be all the brightest. So if you draw from the whole, you're doing better. So I want women to be considered equal to the men, and let's draw from the best and the brightest, because that's what it's going to take for companies to do well. But if you want them to contribute to the economy and also have children, you have to provide a support structure. You can't put so much burden on the women that they just give up out of sheer stress, and they just cannot handle the competing pressures. And so I felt that people like me who had a support system, built support structures, somehow made it work, or to come forth and talk about the fact that we need to work together to build these support structures. And that's really what I'm committed to right now, to figuring out how we can all come together, all people working on this issue, people who have not yet started to work on this issue, come together and mobilize policies, structures, support systems to enable young family builders to have a family and contribute to the economy, because families are fragile. You never know when a woman is going to be called on to be the primary breadwinner. That doesn't happen overnight. You've got to be a breadwinner for a while to become the primary breadwinner. So I think the time has come to think about women and men as equal contributors to a family, equal breadwinners, and equal talent contribute to the economy.
Now, the book is essentially divided in 4 parts. And let me follow that sequence in my question. Let's start in the beginning. You talk about your convent school experience, you talk about your education, and you write in the book, Holy Angels was no picnic. What was the experience that led to the foundation for who you are today?
First of all, I grew up in a South Indian family where the girls and boys were treated the exact same way. We were never deprived of any opportunities because we were girls. We were given the same opportunity. We had a grandfather as a major figure in the family who made sure that we studied. We were given the right, remedial education if we struggle in math or English or whatever. He upped our quality constantly. And the family provided a framework, a disciplined framework, but gave us freedom within that frame. So that was a very good upbringing. And then they sent us to one of the best private schools in the city, close to our home. And they basically said the education of the children is more important than our own vacations or eating out. So they never went out, they never ate out, they never went on vacations. Every rupee went towards children's education. And Holy Angels was one of the finest schools in Madras. Those days it still is, in the sense that people of all walks of life came to Holy Angels, different religions, different parts of society. So we all looked at each other as students in the class. There was no, you're superior, I'm inferior, none of that stuff. We were all classmates. So we learned how to live as a community, enjoy each other as a community, learn from each other as a community, from phenomenal Irish nuns who were disciplinarians, but good disciplinarians, and a teaching staff that was second to none. So I think that we were given a solid education. But what's most interesting, Anurag? My parents never, ever came to school, even once. To them, if a report card came, the teachers were always right. Don't tell me the teachers made a mistake, because we're not going to go argue anything about your report card to the teacher. If the teacher doled out punishment, she's right. You must have done something wrong. So they believed in the teaching staff, in the principals, in the school. And it was a whole different environment that I grew up in. And to me, that gave me a fantastic foundation.
Today, world know you because of your accomplishments at Pepsi. And you became the person that you're known as today, a professional, as a leader in your PepsiCo years, as we talk about in the book. So tell us, what were the highlights of your PepsiCo years? And you already talked about the doom loop, in the book when you wrote about news reports that came up at the time of choosing your successor. You talked right up front. But give us, what were the highlights of your PepsiCo years, so to say?
I think, as everybody knows, it's a privilege to be a CEO of a big company. I mean, look, you're being given the keys to one of the most iconic consumer companies in the world that's been around forever, is always run by a white male, and now they're picking a colored immigrant female to run the company. I mean, that shows that the board was basically looking for the right person to run the company at that time, rather than saying it's got to be a white male or a white female, anything of that sort. So that part was just, I was surprised that they picked me. In retrospect, I can understand why, but at that point I was surprised. But I was also very heartened and touched that they approached it with such objectivity. But once you become a CEO, especially because of my background and appearance and everything like that, you are judged differently. You're always in the public eye. And you're in the public eye for weird reasons, not just because you're a CEO, but because you're different. So every little thing about you, they amplify. For example, at 5:30 or 6 in the evening, if I was still working, I'd kick off my heels and walk on the carpeted floors bare feet because the feet hurt. They wrote about me, the CEO that walks around bare feet. No, I don't. In the night, I kick off my heels. If you were wearing heels, you do the same thing. So they were always trying to create an image of me that wasn't always true. But it caused people to be interested in me or intrigued about me. Who is this person? Who is this person that hums a tune? Hey, in the night when you're stressed out, it's okay to hum a tune. What's the big deal? But, people made a big story out of that. And so I think that my PepsiCo years were filled with people focusing on me for the right reasons and the wrong reasons. And because I took on a very ambitious agenda. I said to myself that I want to run PepsiCo for the duration of the company, not the duration of the CEO. And for me, that means this has got to be a company that lasts forever. I was very influenced by a poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson called The Brook. You must have read it, Anurag, in your convent school. There's a line in the refrain in the book which says, "For men may come and men may go, but I go on forever." For men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. Companies are like that. CEOs may come and CEOs may go, but the company should go on forever. And every CEO should make it better for the next person. So I was singularly focused on that. How do we future-proof PepsiCo? How do I build a talent base for the company for the future? And how do I build a succession bench for the company? So I was so focused on that task. That was my PepsiCo years. I did everything possible to fulfill those 3 goals I'd set for myself.
Absolutely. And again, one of the, I always say that leaders are about competence. They can be male or female. Of course, when you are a woman, as you said, the responsibilities are more, and sometimes you're judged for the wrong thing. And I agree. But you tried in your, even in the book, there are several references you made to your interaction with Don Kendall, right from changing the pavement to the suggested county club membership. It was, in fact, your husband, Raj, who told you, why would you want to be a member of a club that does not allow women members, but you still considered the thought. Should you face this today, what would you do differently?
Today, I'll probably not even bring it to his attention, but I'll tell you my thinking then. The country club had the most beautiful golf course. He plays golf, I don't. I don't even like going to country clubs because I'm a vegetarian. What can I eat there? I don't drink. I'm just the most boring person that way. And so even if we had become members of a country club, it would have been to allow him to have a social life and, entertain people and play golf. I gave him the choice, but in retrospect, I shouldn't have even given him that choice. But I'm married to a damn good guy. The minute I even brought it up to him, he just looked at me, that look which said, "You nuts or what? They don't admit women. Why would I even go there?" So he was just, he's Mr. Equality in spades. And we have 2 daughters and we love the fact that we have 2 daughters. So he was quick in his response.
Now, I honestly was surprised to read about what transpired ahead of the Kimsuka Narasimhan PepsiCo hire. More about this. You push the change from there. In the long run, how have you been judging your impact from there on? And how have you seen instances such as these bring about change?
It's interesting because clearly everybody is comfortable with hiring somebody who looks like them. Okay? Or shares values that they do, or shares experiences they do. And so you end up furthering your own self or, cloning your own self in a funny way when you have to hire somebody. And then when it comes to women, there are a lot of predetermined opinions you have or, judgments you have about women, which are not particularly correct. In the case of PepsiCo India, when they were looking for a CFO at that time, because we had promoted the existing CFO to a job outside the United States, they kept looking at male candidates, I presume, because everybody who was shown to me were male candidates. And I said, why aren't there any women in the bench that you're showing me? Because the CFO job is a great job for a woman because it doesn't require too much travel. So I thought, hey, this is great for India. Why don't we get a fantastic woman CFO? The immediate reaction was, yeah, Indra, the reason we didn't look at women particularly was because we didn't look for women particularly is because women always move when their husbands get a promotion or are asked to move to another job. I said, oh, really? Just women, huh? Not the men? They said, no, just the women. I said, what happened to the previous CFO? Oh, he moved because his wife got a job in a different place. Aha. So now when the wife gets a job in a different place and the guy moves, that's okay. But when a woman has to move with the husband, it's considered not so great. So I said, hey guys, stop this conversation. Go and cast your net wide and look for the best candidate, not the best male candidate. And I want to see women represented on the bench that you share with me. And I have to tell you, several women were on the list, and Kim Sukha Narasimhan was the best. Of all the candidates, not just the women candidate, all the candidates, she was the best. This again goes to show that if you remove your biases and you look at the entire candidate pool, you'd be amazed how many women will show up on your list.
Again, in the book, right at the upfront, you talk about your relationship with your sister. And your sister is celebrated and accomplished in her own way, especially in the music and arts domain. Give us a sense of how did your relationship with your sister impact who you are?
My sister and I are a year apart. She's older than me by 1 year. And she's brilliant. She's very talented. And as a first child, she had more pressure than I did. Because, everybody expects a lot out of their first child. They also put a lot of pressure to get married onto the first child. So she had to pave the path. So it was much easier for me to follow. The great thing about having a sister so close in age, we competed on everything. So I had somebody I had to do better than. So that was a great way for me to up my own performance. She was also the favorite of my grandfather. Oh my God, my grandfather adored my sister for good reason. So I wanted to earn his love and affection too. So every time there was competition between me and my sister, I don't think she was competing with me. I was competing with her. And later on in life, she went on to McKinsey. I was at the Boston Consulting Group. So again, we were in competing consulting firms. She rose up the McKinsey ranks and then went on to do different things, then became a Grammy-nominated musician. I cannot compete with her on music because she's a gifted musician. I'm just a shower singer. So I think this is where the competition ended. She has her family, I have my family. We're all very close. She's a big philanthropist, a leader, sits on boards, sits on the NYU board for engineering and the NYU University. She's very accomplished. We are very close. And in many ways, like peas in a pod, we can finish each other's statements anytime. And I know that if I ever needed a kidney or a liver, she was the first person to donate it to me. So this is my sister. My soul and my heart are shared with her.
Thank you so much. Now, let me ask you, Ms. Nooyi, you've seen it all. In the book also, you talk about some of your meetings with heads of state. Early in the first chapter, you talk about your visit to the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And again, that impacted you. You've done it all. You were the CEO of a large, celebrated brand and business. You did acquisitions which were big, like the Quaker Oats acquisition. You've now written a book. You're very well known across the globe, especially in India and the US. What is left for Ms. Nooyi to accomplish? Is there a bucket list that Ms. Nooyi has?
I think that I owe it to myself and to all of society to give back. Now, I've done all of the things that have given me a platform now to make society better. I'm a person driven by purpose, whether you think about my job at J&J or what I was doing in Motorola or my many assignments at BCG. I'm driven by a sense of purpose. And that's what allowed me to do what I did at PepsiCo. So I've taken on this whole issue of supporting young family builders to have families and to be in paid, to have the choice to be in paid work as one of my next big causes. And so in addition to everything I do in serving on nonprofit boards, serving on boards, helping the state of Connecticut one of the most important jobs I want to do is to work with all of the organizations who are working on these issues, convene them and think about how to move it from research and thought to action. At the end of the day, people should look back at you and not talk about your net worth, but talk about the societal worth. And so I'm thinking more about what can I contribute to society so I feel like I made country a better place, society a better place, in my own little way.
If you had to give career advice to women today who are in middle level and were looking to lead and head big companies, what would be your advice to them? And I'm talking to you in Indian context.
If you already reached middle management, that is a major accomplishment for you. First of all, kudos for getting there. People get noticed when you put your hand up for the difficult assignments and you get it done. And make sure that when you take on a difficult assignment, you have the mental bandwidth, the physical capability to do it, because it requires enormous curiosity. It requires zooming in to the issue and zooming out to understand how the issue that you're working on fits in with the rest of the company. You have to approach the assignment you're given very differently. And you've got to make a mark for yourself. You've got to be noticed. You've got to be noticed not because of the way you dress or the way you laugh or how you behave in a party. You have to be noticed for the caliber of the work that you did. Because ultimately, it's all about competence. Everything else are trappings around competence. So put your hand up for the toughest assignment. Ask for help. Ask people for advice. Look at other people who've done similar things. Learn from them. But distinguish yourself because you've done something that people go, gee, so-and-so did it, and I don't think anybody could have done it any better. And if you did that and made a name for yourself based on the quality of your work, there's no stopping you going.
Thank you so much for that very deep advice. And of course, the whole book is interesting. And, I've already recommended it to one friend. But tell me, what's your favorite chapter in the book? I know the book is into four kind of, broader themes. And then within that, there are chapters. Which is your favorite chapter, Ms. Nooyi, in the book?
The two chapters I like a lot. The first is the first chapter. I love it because, it starts with this, the swing in the house. And just the memories of the swing. It's like when you read that chapter, I'm imagining myself as a kid sitting on that swing. I'm imagining all the elders in the house swinging on the swing and the noise and the chatter and all of the conversations that were going on. If that swing could talk, oh my God, the kinds of stories we could tell. So I miss my tata, I miss my father, I miss all of them. And so that chapter it gives me warmth inside. It makes me emotional. It makes me feel lucky about what I had as a childhood. It evokes a range of emotions that, I read that chapter so many times, I still feel emotional about it all. I'm so glad I won the lottery of life in being born in that family and being sent to school and having my tata as a role model. So that first chapter I love because it sets the stage for everything else. The next chapter I like a lot is the chapter where I talk about bias. I think it's chapter 9 or 10. I talk about unconscious bias, what I had to face, how we had to address it. To me, that was a very important chapter. What needs to happen to change bias. Even in the upper echelons of business, I faced my own version of bias. That's the reality. How you cope with it. It was raw. It was honest from the heart. And I talk about that. So that was an interesting chapter to write. I enjoyed every chapter of the book, writing it, because it was always a choice about what to include in 90,000 words, which was the limit I was given for the book. So how much to include and how much not. And so, so many other stories that, one could talk about.
I've always said, my wife is a working wife, but for her, family comes first. 2 children come first. I can do a lot. My wife spends time with them. And in a chapter, you talk about the fact that for all your work, stress, travel, and impossible schedule, you really tried to make sure that you were a caring, involved mother the extent you could. To give a sense, how can women who are really at the top, balance both? Is there a playbook for leaders, women leaders who are in senior management? How do they balance? I'm sure that comes to them instinctively, intuitively, because being a mother is very, very, it's very natural.
Balance is the wrong word, because balance assumes it's perfectly in the fulcrum is, staying straight. And there's no balance. It's just, how do you go from pillar to post, if you want to call it that? How do you somehow get all of this done and make sure there's no major damage? And there is no manual. You have to evolve it. I think in my case, I wanted to be a caring mother, and I tried my best to be that. And I have to tell you, there are many mothers who gave up their jobs after getting a college degree and decide to stay home. And then they feel very resentful about the fact that they didn't get a chance to work, because at some point they want the power of the purse. So there is no right answer. Whether you want to be a stay-at-home mother or you want to be a working mother or not a mother at all, there is no right answer. It's your choice. And once you make a choice, build a support system. Somehow or the other, you can't do it alone. Make sure you marry the right person. Because, the family is a joint responsibility. It's not just the mother's responsibility. It's a joint responsibility. Make sure that you build an external support system that can also help you, like I did with my assistants, with my relatives, with my mother, my sister, everything. You've just got to build a support system. And you've got to make sacrifices yourself. In my case, wherever in the world I was, I would call at 4 o'clock to check whether my children had come home. 4:01 and the phone rang, and knew it was mom. And until the kids were in the house and the front door locked, I was not happy. Some people would say, God, you're such a hovering mother. It's not the case. I'm a mother, not a hovering mother. I'm a mother. And whenever I traveled, Anurag, if I was out for a week, for every day of the week, I would write a letter for each of the kids. And I would give it to the babysitter to say, give it to them every morning. And if I was going to Beijing or Shanghai, I would say, today I'm in Beijing. Let me tell you what I'm seeing in Beijing. So I would pre-write all of those letters so that they had those letters to keep in touch with me. And of course, I'd call them on the phone 2 or 3 times a day. I'd call the kids separately. I'd call my mother, because if I didn't call her 2 or 3 times a day, even today, she thinks something is wrong. So I think there's no manual. You have to put in the effort. You've got to create the support systems, and you've got to give up things that you want to do. You can't do it all, because being a mother is a full-time job. Being a wife, daughter-in-law, these are all big-time jobs. And being a CEO is 3 or 4 jobs rolled into one. So there's only still 24 hours in a day. So you have to find some way of juggling all of these things. The word balance doesn't really come into the picture.
When I was preparing for it, looking at the background, reading the book, and seeing the trend, today a lot of CFOs of large companies are becoming CEOs. Let me give you an example of, Mahindra Group is a very respected, and a very large group, respected and large both. The revered group CFOs between the group CEO and MD, and really professionally run the conglomerate. And I can give you numerous examples, whether it's a TCS, and I'm talking large companies, I'm not. CFOs going on to become CEOs. Give me a sense of, because you did that role, and then you became the CEO. What is it about CFOs that makes for excellent CEOs? Again, you cannot never generalize, but in the last 5-7 years, I've seen a lot of that.
There are 2 kinds of CFOs. One is a CFO who came through the control rank, who's just an accountant plus.
A financial controller.
Right. They rarely make it a CEO. But if you have somebody who could have come from accounting or whatever background, but has an expansive view of the company, who thinks about capital allocation and resource prioritization in interesting ways with an eye towards the future of the company, then that person is a candidate for CEO. Because they're willing to think of the company beyond the narrow accounting of today. Because accounting is a rear view mirror function. And financial accountants tend to have a very good rear view mirror. CEOs need to have a forward-looking perspective. And there are a few CFOs who say, hey, let's allocate resources this way because it'll take the company to a better place. Many CFOs just put hurdles in your way. Oh, you can't do that. They never give you a way to get around the hurdle. So if you have a CFO who knows how to do capital allocation for the future benefit of the company, put your arms around that CFO, hold them tight because they're the best asset you could have. And they could be CEO candidates. As long as they show an appreciation for business. They have to show an appreciation for business. Learning the fundamentals of the business, learning about talent, learning about how to promote talent. They've got to show that other side of them too. Otherwise, you'll have a one-track CFO.
CFO seems like a person responsible for growth, which is really the CEO's job, right. The Chief Future Officer. I will ask my last two questions. One is you did the Quaker Oats acquisition. It's a very large company. Also, it has brands that are venerable. And you talk about it in the book. Why don't you tell the readers and viewers what went into your mind when you did this?
Quaker Oats? We'd coveted the Quaker Oats company for a long time because, in the morning day part, breakfast day part, which is a healthy day part, we didn't have any food item to sell as PepsiCo. In Frito-Lay, we tried to make bars and call them Frito bars, Dorito bars, but somehow they never tasted good because we were a fried, salty snack company. And a breakfast bar is not a fried product. It's supposed to be nutritious, have nuts and seeds and fruit and granola. We never knew how to make it. So a lot of the attraction of Quaker Oats was this Quaker trademark, which was a very powerful morning day part. And we needed to include that in the morning day part of PepsiCo. Just as we did the Tropicana acquisition in 1997, because before 10 a.m. in the morning, nobody reached for a beverage that Pepsi made. Because all ours were fun-for-you beverages that people consumed after about 10 or 11 in the morning. They drank hot coffee or something in the morning. At that point, we didn't have coffee in the portfolio. So we wanted a morning beverage that was healthy, which was Tropicana. Quaker Oats was the sister or the companion food product for the morning day part. And surprisingly, people thought we bought Quaker Oats for Gatorade. Gatorade was a powerful sports drink. Yes, we loved it. But that was the very logical external reason. The real underlying reason was the Quaker brand name.
Even in this answer, you alluded to the fact that consumers are moving towards immunity, health, especially in a post-pandemic scenario. Health for individuals has more significance and more focus than ever. Immunity. So I want to ask you, and at the same time, companies' focus is sustainability. We've been talking at least for 2 decades of triple bottom line, people, profits, and planet. But I think the people and planet have become more important in the last 17 months. I'm not saying for the company you work for, a lot more company. Generally, we tend to think a lot more about real issues. So give us a sense of your future predictions in terms of this movement towards health and immunity from individuals, and hence companies will have to make shifts, and companies' movement towards more sustainable practices in the complete value chain. Give us a sense of what do you see happening.
So let me speak about products first. I think that you cannot mandate what people should eat or drink. People don't like it. That's a very personal choice. People will make the choices that they are comfortable making based on their lifestyles, the universe of things they eat, and how they feel. So you can't mandate it. What branded companies can do in particular is provide great tasting, healthy products that are affordable and make sure they're ubiquitously available to everybody. So that you don't tell people, if you want the healthier product, you have to pay more, or it's going to taste awful, or not as good as the fun for you product, or it's going to cost more, or it's going to not be available as much as the fun for you product. So if you approach healthy products on par with the fun for you products or slightly advanced than the fun for you products, I think branded consumer goods companies have a chance to try to nudge consumers towards the healthier offering. But this is a push and a pull. The consumer companies can push, the pull from consumers has got to change. So consumers have to realize that they have to eat healthier and drink healthier and make the right choice. Now on the planet, it's different. I think when it comes to the planet, I don't think it's a choice. I think we have a crisis that's coming. And if we don't all figure out how we're going to reduce plastic use, how we're going to reduce our carbon footprints, how we're going to use less water for frivolous reasons, I think when the proof comes that we are all suffering under global warming, it's going to be too late. It's going to be way too late. We will get to the crisis faster than we can fix the crisis. And that's going to be a terrible scorecard on humanity. It's a terrible scorecard for leaders, business leaders, political leaders. So I think together we have to start laying down regulation, policy, mandates, taxes, whatever it takes to set up circular economies so we can reuse as much as we can and recycle as much as we can. Because if we didn't do that, Anurag, I worry about what the future of the world is going to be.
Absolutely. And while I was reading the book, I asked the first question because I remember somewhere in the book you talk about you send a PepsiCo team to MIT's Age Lab, and a center for research on the quality of life for older and aging people. Clearly, that's why I asked you, post-pandemic, that's even more relevant. And I want to let you go by asking, I said this would be my two last questions, but I want to ask you, we in India have had a male prime minister many years back. Now US has a vice president who's a woman. When do you see America having a women president?
I don't know. I think I think there have been very capable women who could have been president, but at the end of the day, the electorate should be ready to elect or to vote for a woman as president. I hope in my lifetime I see a woman president. I really hope so. Having a female vice president is a major breakthrough, but I hope in my lifetime, and I'm confident in my lifetime, we'll see a woman president. But I hope she becomes president because she's the most capable person, not because of her gender.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nooyi. Thank you for talking to us, and we wish you luck in your book, My Life in Full. I've enjoyed reading it, and I'm sure our viewers and readers would. And we look forward to doing more interactions with you, and hopefully see you in India soon, and hopefully collaborate to do a more physical book launch. We're optimistic about the future. Hopefully, Corona at some stage will be behind us. The world will be fully vaccinated. Congratulations on writing this book, and thanks for talking to BW Business World. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you too, Dr. Batra. It's been a pleasure talking to you.